of the Parliamentary Conference. Our fourth session will be on the thematic of the inclusion of the refugees on the national plans. I will be seconded by Mrs. Honorable Midrand of Rwanda and Mr. Mamadou Diambambe, Deputy Director of the UNHCR, who's going to take the floor.
Honorable Chair, I think it's quite helpful probably to say how yesterday's discussions and very rich contributions have helped all of us understand what is the Global Compact on Refugees and what we are trying to do in December in Geneva during the first Global Refugee Forum. So we really wanted to thank you. I think all of us found the interventions extremely rich and positive and helpful. So as we move forward. Secondly, when today we start discussing the inclusion of refugees into the national systems, we are not, and I really want to underline that, we are not speaking here about local integration of refugees. It's not about saying that refugees are going to be fixed in countries hosting them so that they will never return to their home countries. I just want to underline that. So the inclusion of refugees is not about fixing them. It's about enabling the refugees to live dignified lives as long as they remain as refugees. That's the main aim. And as you will recall, in the Global Compact on Refugees, the idea was to make sure that while we ease the pressure on host countries, large host countries, we are able to help refugees live more dignified life, much more sustainable lives until such a time we have dealt with the root causes or we found third country solutions. So that's really a clarification I want to make. And for today's discussion, as just announced by the chair, we will not only have Honorable Manira Arora, who will speak to us about her own country's example, about inclusion of refugees into a health national system, insurance system, so that you can hear from that very practical example. As I said earlier yesterday, all these good practices are not good wishes or wishes. They are really realities grounded on very good, smart policies. So she will tell us about that example. And then we will have via video conference two colleagues. One of them is our own colleague, Mr. Jonathan Araya, who is a senior policy advisor, Global Compact on Refugees, based in Nairobi for the Eastern Horn of Africa. And he will tell us a bit more about what we are really learning when it comes to socioeconomic inclusion of refugees and why we are asking for it. So I think that will be very helpful on what are we learning. And he will be with Ms. Daniela Henrique Penhas, who works for the International Financial Corporation. It is the private sector arm of the World Bank. She will also tell us a bit more about the role of the private sector when it comes to financial inclusion or socioeconomic inclusion of refugees, the role of the private sector, and there also what we are learning as we are moving forward. These are the three interventions that we are going to hear from. But before I pass the floor to Honorable Manira Arora, I just want to say here that many countries represented in these rooms have all led the way towards, or the path towards socioeconomic inclusion of refugees. So many countries here have decided since the 60s to not have refugee camps in West Africa, in Southern Africa, in Central Africa, as well as in North Africa. Many other countries had said that We do not want to keep refugees encamped and without freedom of movement, because it is not good for the refugees themselves, it is not good for the host populations, and it has a negative impact on social cohesion. So many of the countries here, so if we select these very specific countries, doesn't mean that other countries have not led the way, but we just wanted to share with you very recent examples. So Honorable Manirarora, please share with us the example of Rwanda. Thank you.
Merci. Comme Mamadou vient de le dire, je vais vous partager les expériences de notre pays, le Rwanda, à ce qui concerne l'inclusion.
As Mr. Mamadou has said, I'm going to share the examples of what Rwanda is doing, especially with regard to the health system. I will start. Before introducing this health care system, which falls under the developmental plan in our country, we had faced problems with refugees who were living within cities, and the students were attending university and schools. Before introducing to the plenary this system, there were agreements between the Ministry of Emergency and Management, and the Rwanda Social Security Board and the UNHCR. This is what we call what is called the tripartite. Before this, we had an MOU in between the tripartite on concerning the healthcare system for the refugees who are not living in the refugee camps, and this was a crucial problem. First and foremost, to have access these healthcare systems for the refugees who are living in urban cities, they had to go through African Humanitarian Actions, which is a key partner, a core partner of the UNHCR. This African Humanitarian Action was ensuring the intermediary, the catalyst between the hospitals and the healthcare centers, so that the refugees could benefit the healthcare. And afterward, the invoices were sent to the UNHCR, who had to deal with. Our main issue was that with this this catalyst process with African Humanitarian Action, except the children between 0 to 12 years and the aged people between 60 and above, who were covered by this very system that are elucidated. Other people had issues with regard to benefiting to their healthcare system because they were very expensive. The pupils and attending the schools had also issues when somebody were to fall sick. This people had to go back to the UN refugees camps just for basic health care, or to be even sent to the hospitals. To deal with this issue, the Rwandan government has agreed to cover all these people for the insurance, health insurance, which is called as a cooperative health. The UNHCR elaborates the list and sends it to the Rwandan Social Security Board, which will register it with the IDs of those refugees. When they are recognized within the system, when one person amongst them falls sick, that very person will go to healthcare centers or hospitals who will pay an amount of 200 Rwandan francs, which equates 0.2 US dollars as every Rwandan citizen. This system covers all refugees who are outside the refugees camps. The refugee camps who are not registered, and the internal students in non-mobile schools. With regard to their tripartite MOU, which I underscored earlier on, signed between UNHCR and MINEMA. The content of this MOU goes as follows. There are compromises, engagement with all the stakeholders. MINEMA, which is a Ministry of Management, will be the one who will ensure the implementation of the system. And it works in synergy with the UNHCR for the beneficiaries to facilitate them to have healthcare insurance. And then MINEMA co-facilitates the meetings and the fora, the permanent fora of refugees to ensure the healthcare systems of the refugees. And this ministry, MINEMA, as I said, will ensure the transfer of money with regard to the contribution of healthcare as agreed on the 2019 project, this partnership project. And they will ensure the transfer of funds, the premiums for the insurance, which is a compulsory contribution, healthcare contribution as agreed on the 2019 agreement for the Pillar 1 Refugees Program. Rwanda Social Security Board will undertake to receive all the contributions of all the beneficiaries and to manage them. And they will receive the transfer of contributions and they will provide all breakdowns to the UNHCR. They will elaborate a format for the UNHCR which is acceptable to show all the breakdowns of the beneficiaries. And this very entity will submit the daily report for all the registry of the refugees living in cities and the internal pupils and the list of refugees who do not possess yet, who have not yet processed yet the identity card from the UNHCR. And it covers as well health insurance and also for the refugees living in the cities and the refugees who are living in the same conditions as Rwandese. And it will send as well to the UNHCR and MINEMA all the breakdowns and audit journals. The UNHCR will undertake to work in synergy with MINEMA with regard to all the beneficiaries to facilitate all the health cover to all the beneficiaries. The UNHCR will facilitate the meetings of all the participants and the refugees fora concerning the health insurance cover. And they will undertake to the transfer of the funds to MINEMA falling under the annual budget as requested by MINEMA. In the project partnership agreements, Pillar 1. They communicate regularly with MINEMA and NSSB for the registry enrollment of all the students and pupils and the concerned refugees. And finally, the UNHCR will be in constant communication with the refugees and all the students for the enrollment and renewal of the list. I thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you, Honorable.
A system, and Honorable will tell us, Madam Rosa, how helpful that has been to Rwanda. You can see how we moved from a system that was totally run by NGOs, by humanitarian actors, to a system whereby the government of Rwanda, the Rwanda Social Security Board, and UNHCR have worked together to pilot an insurance scheme that in fact is much less costly, much more effective, and for which we have had a dialogue between the service providers, the refugees, as well as the Rwanda Social Security Board. I think that's just an example we wanted to share with you, and if later partners or want to hear more about why this has been beneficial or not, and we know that it is also pilot in several other countries on the continent, that would be interesting. Now, without further ado, I wanted to pass the floor to our colleagues based in Nairobi now. Jonathan, good morning. Can you please tell us in 5 minutes why is socioeconomic inclusion important and how is it being supported? Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Good morning, Mamadou. Good morning, dear colleagues. Let me start by appreciating this important forum and the need to look at the global refugee forum and how it is refugee compact and how it is applied. Now, my answers are actually in that context. Now, let me start by saying that the reason why socioeconomic inclusion is important is because the model we had before had a lot of shortcomings. Now, normally, what we used to do, especially in many refugee hosting countries in Africa, we used parallel systems using humanitarian financing to provide socioeconomic services to refugees and host communities using NGOs, and in most cases, our refugee response is not linked to the government development agenda. We don't plan in a coherent manner. We don't speak to what the government is planning to do with host communities. And in many places, although we spend millions and millions of dollars to provide services to refugees, host communities were not getting sufficient assistance. And as a result, the institutions in refugee hosting areas were not actually strengthened as a result of this continuous aid that was going to these areas. So to a certain extent, especially in protracted refugee hosting situations, it became a lose-lose deal. Billions of dollars have gone to refugee hosting areas, yet when the refugees go back home, we didn't have anything substantive to show for what is happening. We also realized that it's not simply an efficient use of resources, but to continue building parallel systems, and we don't get sustainable results. So in the context of the Global Compact on Refugees and the New York Declaration, we started asking ourselves, how could we deliver aid better? How could we make sure that the resources to refugees could also help host communities and could also contribute to the growth of the refugee hosting areas. So integrating services became one of what we call the low-hanging fruits that would help. So we've seen also very clear examples. For example, in Eastern Horn of Africa, the region where I focus on, we've seen in places where government-financed health centers were built next to the UNHCR-financed health centers. This is because of lack of planning and lack of coordination. So by taking a different approach, we felt that we would improve. So we did a number of things. One, we started working with governments to include refugee issues in national and subnational planning so that we could plan together, so that we could identify opportunities to plan together. In some places, we started moving away from NGO-delivered services to government-delivered services. And I think the excellent example provided on Rwanda is a testimony to that. So we are exploring those. But in addition, we are also strengthening our partnership with development actors to support the socio-economic integration of services. So what do we do in practical terms? We are playing the role of a catalyst, we are playing the role of a facilitator. So it's not that we get money from development actors to support refugees. We are supporting development actors with whatever that they are doing to increase their response to refugees and host communities. And there are a number of areas that development actors could support. One is this area of analytical activity. Development actors, especially the likes of the World Bank, have the analytical capability on socio-economic issues. So by combining their analytical capabilities with our operational capabilities and operational data we have on refugee issues, we started doing analysis and say, would it make sense? Would it make economic sense to follow a different approach? And we have experience, for example, in Kenya, we looked at how the value of actually integrating, socio-economically integrating refugees. And it turned out that after doing the modeling and the analysis, it turned out that it would actually benefit Kenya and the refugee hosting area in Turkana if we followed a different approach. So that analysis is helping us identify options and better options to do that. The second one is we are collaborating with development actors and encouraging them approach. And in this regard, one of the projects that we are closely interacting with is a regional displacement project in the Eastern Horn of Africa. It is over $400 million project covering Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, and there, this project is trying to use a community-driven development. They empower communities to identify and prioritize their service delivery needs and to deliver those services or to provide assistance using government systems. So host communities and refugees, as they benefit from it, the capacity of the local governments will also be strengthened. So it's not our project, it's a World Bank financed project, but we are serving as friends of the project. We are supporting the World Bank, we're supporting the government with the design and implementation of projects. And the idea is by doing this, we will have much more efficient use of aid resources and we will be for the countries of origin and to be productive citizens. So that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. These are extremely good reflections, and then we will hear later. Can we now go to Daniela Henrique Panhas from the private sector arm of the World Bank, particularly at the International Financial Corporation. Daniela, over to you.
Yes, thanks a lot. So, Excellencies, Honorables, thank you very much for inviting the IFC to speak in front of you. It's not very often that IFC is invited to speak in front of a parliament. That's because the World Bank is doing that, and we as the IFC, as the private sector arm, thank you, we are working with the private sector. We're investing in the private sector in big corporates. So you might now say, why is the IFC now here? Why is the IFC presenting? Why is the IFC now sitting around the table when it comes to discussions about refugees? So that's because of this new way of thinking, new way of working. Jonathan elaborated on that. It's about self-reliance. I normally call it's living a normal life. And we all know that living a normal life means you need a job or you need a business to generate income so that you are able to pay for your expenses. So there the private sector, you can't leave the private sector out. So we are coming into the picture. And we were drawn into this picture a couple of years ago, actually by UNHCR Kenya. This gentleman next to me knows how the story was. And we saw a potential to develop the private sector, to support refugee entrepreneurs, but more importantly, to bring private companies to these refugee hosting areas to develop, to create jobs for the host community, and then also including the refugees. But the private sector needs information. They have to know, and we also had to better understand, because having a gut feeling, it's not sufficient to actually incentivize, motivate a private company to invest. So we did a study called Kakuma as a marketplace. It's about looking at Kakuma refugee camps here in northwestern Kenya from a perspective of a private company investing into a new area, meaning we monetized the market. We looked at the population size. We looked at how many businesses are there. We looked at financial literacy rates, mobile phone penetration, mobile money usage, loan usage, consumption preferences, brands, known brands. So all these things. And our gut feeling was right. So if you look at Kakuma, it's a market of $56 million annually. And it's very conservatively estimated, because we didn't consider the in-kind contributions which coming from UNHCR and WFP. It's a market of 250,000 currently, roughly 250,000 people. It's comparable to the 7th, 8th largest city of Kenya. However, you just see two banks. You don't see any bigger hotels or restaurants. So it's astonishing if you compare it to really Kenya's 7th or 8th largest city. So it's we underserved from a market perspective. Mobile phone penetration is quite high, 70%, 85% in the town, 70% in the camps. However, mobile money usage is still very low. And everybody we asked responded they need access to capital, access to finance, financial services. So basically, what we did with these findings? So we designed a program addressing these findings. So we have two underlying key pressing issues. One is the access to finance, but the other one is as well the barriers for the host community and also refugee entrepreneurs. So refugee entrepreneurs normally have more de facto barriers than the host community. So the program we designed is called Kakuma Kalobei Challenge Fund. It addresses access to finance by setting up a rolling competitive business challenge, giving performance-based grants to small local enterprises. Performance-based entrepreneurs. How do we barriers? Those and overcome the de facto environment. Supporting private companies will not have this impact as we would like to achieve. If you're talking about self-reliance, meaning so it means you can actually deal with people and take out loans. So we are working on bringing government services and county level services closer to the host community and the refugees in Kakuma. So this is a program, and we, of course, as IFC, we're working with the big corporates. So we reached out to our existing clients, the companies we invested in, and presented them the findings of Kakuma, showed them their opportunities, their entry points, and incentivized, motivated a bank, an insurance company, a processing company, and a low-cost education provider to work with us to help them to expand their services or to invest in this area. So we have the aim to create jobs, to improve the services and the products which are currently delivered, feeding into what Jonathan elaborated on, a new way of working, self-reliance, area-based development, so that the country itself benefits from that. And because this study, Kakuma as a marketplace, it's first of its kind, a new perspective, looking at this area from a private company, looking for opportunities to invest. It created a lot of interest. So we are now doing this as well in Uganda. We are also looking at entry points for private companies in Ethiopia and Sudan. So this is the goal, that the little nascent nucleus we created here in Kenya expanded to East Africa, to see how we can create jobs and help support host community and the refugees. So I stop here and open for questions.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I think it's also very good to hear from you about the example of Kakuma, not necessarily seen as a refugee camp alone, but as a place which is, because of the size, could equal the 7th or the 8th largest city in Kenya. And it's also interesting to see that when you go and do the studies and looking at the opportunities for private sector engagement, you were able to find a good study written by experts with the participation of government institutions, and that study is there available, and that study has led to many more advocacy tools to bring in private sector to come and create jobs for host populations and refugees, so that all of them will be benefiting from the presence of this. And then you are leveraging your own partnership with private sector entities to come and support that. Since this has been very helpful, you are also looking at Uganda, you are looking at Sudan, and you are looking at Ethiopia in the eastern horn of Africa, at least, so that you some of these good practices will not be lost. So I think we have really done the round for presentations, and I give back the floor to our Honorable Chair for questions, and colleagues remain available. Honorable Chair, over to you.
Merci beaucoup pour la parole.
Thank you for the floor. Now we're going to proceed with questions. Honorables, should you have any questions, please post them. Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to commend and salute all the participants and those who are in Nairobi currently. Thank you for these laudable and precious informations which they have shared with us concerning the strategies to enable better lives to these refugees throughout the world, and mainly in the largest camps of refugees in the world, Kakuma, in Kenya. Honorable Madam Chair, concerning Rwanda, I'd like to thank my colleague from Rwanda, Madam Honorable, who shared with us the experiences of her country concerning the integration, namely in the healthcare system, and all the relevant strategies to take into account all the refugees. I would say this will allow this will permit us not to frustrate other people, because this very system is integrated within the country's systems. There is no cause for the citizen of the given country to be frustrated. We commend you, we congratulate the government of Rwanda, well, with the synergies and interdependence with the humanitarian NGOs with which we work. I'd like to thank and congratulate the Rwandan government for its valuable support and taking into account the Libyan refugees. We have seen that the Rwandan government is trying to assist them. These are tangible actions. It's always said that in Africa we talk a lot, but when it comes to actions, we are very reluctant. Now we have joint actions and words. It is very important to commend the Rwandan people for these laudable gestures. We are not surprised, because this is a country which is a point of the African integration. I believe that with Rwanda, one Africa, one voice would not be a dream, but rather a reality. And finally, I will say that since November 2008, there's no visa between Cote d'Ivoire and Rwanda. I thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your intervention, Honorable. Another intervention, please. Senegal, please. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to do a follow-up with my colleague of Cote d'Ivoire to congratulate and comment all the participants, and to commend as well the organizers of this conference, seeing that it's the first time that I've taken the floor. Very particularly to salute the strategies of Rwanda. When I have to glance the situation of the Mauritanian refugees in Senegal, I believe that this is the very strategy that was utilized or used. I would say that we have appreciated this tripartite accord, agreement. I think this is very fundamental. I see that facilitators like humanitarian NGOs working, operating in arenas of education were used in Rwanda. That was the same case in Senegal. But I'd like to call upon your scrupulous attention to say that in practical, we had some hardships or difficulties with regard to dealing with these NGOs. At one time, they took the responsibility which went beyond the role of facilitators. I think this is very important. This created a lot of frustrations with the local Senegalese authorities. This is a request that I would like to do. In one way, it facilitates, but in other aspect, it may create some conflicts of competencies in between these NGOs and the local authorities who, at the finish, have the last word for the inclusivity of these refugees. We had, in the case of Mauritanian refugees, we had a strong agency in task with integration, but at the Senegalese level, we did not feel the need to implement a strong structure to take care of these refugees. We had these Mauritanian refugees who wanted to go back to Mauritania voluntarily, but we had other Mauritanian refugees who wanted to remain in Senegal. The integration at the Senegalese level, it's like it goes on to the point that we did not have the same equilibrium in Senegal. This is a contribution that I wanted to make on the hosting countries. We need to reinforce these hosting countries with powerful structures, effective structures. These were some concerns, and I'm so elated that this is a very good approach that is being used on this tripartite MEU, as well as UNCR and the two countries of hosting and origin. I thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Algeria.
Name of God Almighty, and prayers to all of you. We thank those who have prepared this session for this morning, and thanks to all presenters in terms of experiences from the various member states. Can you hear me from the English booth? The English booth. Can you hear me? Yes, please go ahead, sir. In the name of God Almighty, the greatest, and prayers to all his prophets, I thank the presenters and the organizers for this meeting, and I also thank all those present and those who have contributed through their experiences. We have listened and witnessed an important piece of wisdom yesterday, which is that we have spoken a lot, and now it is no time for talk, but to find implementable solutions. And also, is not the finding of the solutions, but rather the implementation of such solutions in order to combat this crisis by which we are here debating, which is the crisis of all the refugees, returnees, and internally displaced individuals. The reasons of this crisis, if we look at it, are not the scarcity of the information and availability. I believe that we have spoken a lot, and the issue is very clear before us all. The situation is described collectively and in full detail. It might differ from one person to another, but it is still clear. And that's why we have to avoid talking about the description of the refugees. And now we can go into dealing with what was presented. The information does not solve the problem. This is the point of departure. When we react as Africans with the current situation, so that we can consider this issue as a problem for all of us and a message that we can deliver to all concerned, we will be able to find solutions for Africa. In such instance, we can understand the real causes and the grassroots objectives by which we could be able to eliminate this crisis. I believe that this crisis is not caused by Africans. We are the victims of such crisis. This crisis is a result by people outside Africa. A number of these issues that we consider a phenomenon in Africa, is a matter of fact, is not from Africa. With the exception of the natural disasters which are out of our control, I believe that when you look at ideology, religious, political, social crisis and conflicts that emerge in Africa, we do not believe that it is caused by Africans, but it is artificial, and it was created by others so that we can fight each other and we become fragmented and we can dissolve our history and heritage. I believe that the crisis of the refugees in Africa and those our brothers and sisters in the Moroccan region, we have stood against it over and over. We believe that we need to ask from others to assist us, and we get the kindness and the pity of others, but they are not the ones to help us. We have to stand as one man, and we understand that others, when they help us, it is because they are taking more than they are giving, but it is an offer with a hidden hand behind. In Algeria, we have an example when we had refugees and we tried to accommodate them medically. We found that we have used the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Health and Social Cohesion, and the Ministry of the Red Crescent, and also the social development agencies and non-government organizations, and also out of the citizens in the country. And we were able to provide medical services, not just for children and women, but each and every refugee and internally displaced, regardless of his origin and age, regardless of his religion. We were able to offer and extend the medical services that is required, and we have included them in all the government agencies that are available to the citizens. It is almost possible that the services that are offered to the refugees is better than that was offered to our citizens, because they are sharing in the same benefits. we believe that we were able to feed them and to protect them and to offer them shelter. Over and above that, through arrangements with their member states, that they will be rehabilitated in our countries through an agreement. And I say this again, this was through a bilateral agreements with the source countries, because we understood that those refugees and returnees cannot be settled, and their hearts will not be settled until they go back with their dignity to their source country. And I finally state that we as Africans, we are talking and we are talking. We are helping each other, but at the end of the day, we need to offer the help through our solidarity. To make this a serious concern, and then it becomes a message that could be presented so that we do not sell ourselves short in order to live in peace and dignity and security. And Africa can have its own renaissance and dignity. And thank you all. And in God Almighty, I ask you to thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Morocco.
Chairperson, I start by adding my voice to the honorable MPs that are participating here in this meeting, in order to also thank the organizers for this conference, which concerns problems of refugees on the African continent, of which we are all very proud to belong to. My name Mustafa Karim, and I am from the National Council of Morocco. In terms of the issue pertaining the integration of refugees, I believe that a number of the challenges that have been posed for all the host countries is the extent by which in which their integration can take place of such refugees, and their ability to have all the necessary arrangements to be fully integrated in societies. In certain cases, for example, we find that the language barrier is the first issue that works against the integration in terms of finding a suitable place of work. And in my opinion, that this is one of the factors that negatively impacts their marginalization that they experience as refugees. There is another challenge, which is directly related of the availability of resources to the host country in order to integrate the refugees in the planning of the national planning developments or local developments in general. And I believe that this issue was stated in Article 99 of the International Convention for Refugees. Yes, the integration of the refugees is a legislative matter and an administrative in nature, but it is a very expensive and exhaustively a serious burden on the national resources that affects the budget for the ministries of finance, health, and education. And I state before you all the Moroccan experience in terms of integrating the African brothers and sisters in our country. This was done through a program that was by which the government was able to issue identity cards for all the refugees free of charge, in order to benefit of all the social services, medically and educationally. And I also state to re-emphasize that the Moroccan society, with all of its compositions and nature, is a good, a lively example for the integration and the acceptance of others, especially if they belong to this African continent that we duly respect. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for PAP.
My name is Ntloy Motsamai. I'm a member of the National Assembly of Lesotho. designated to the Pan-African Parliament. I just wish to make a brief intervention and an observation. But once again, Madam, I wish to take this opportunity to thank our panelists, one in the room and others who joined us via the video, for not only making such thought-provoking and informative presentations, but for also putting things into a much clearer perspective. Honorable Chair, with regard to fostering social cohesion between refugees and host communities, I think we need to make an in-depth analysis and reflect on what was raised during the deliberations yesterday. There was a concern that the refugees seem to enjoy the utmost attention of the governments, host governments and the international community and the development partners, as well as better service delivery than the host populations. And that this is a potential source of envy and remorse with high probabilities of hostilities. It is my strong conviction and considered view that this aspect is still very relevant, even in this particular session. However, I'm also pleased to know that this has been addressed. Rwanda has given us a model which we all have to follow. In my view, they have gotten it right. And the initiatives which were mentioned via the video, which are taking place in Kenya, are also very good examples and good practices, and it remains with us to replicate this in our various jurisdictions. I thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you. Yes, Honorable.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Said Ibrahim Said from Sahrawi Republic. I am a member of the Pan-African Parliament and the National Parliament of Sahrawi. I belong to one of the oldest settlement camps of refugees in Africa, which is my children now, at the moment, and my family are still residing in some of the very old, the oldest camps in south of Algeria. We commended Algeria during the last session on the issue of refugees as being the country who received the oldest refugees or initiated the oldest refugees camps in Africa due to the situation in Sahrawi since the separation, since the distribution of land between Morocco, Sahrawi, and Spain. The result was 170,000 refugees. Most of them went to this town in Algeria, Tindouf. I went there, I lived there, I studied there in Tindouf. I don't want this to be, I didn't want it to be my case or my situation or my life, but I found that this was the best option for me. The best option for me was to be a refugee in Algeria. My age now is 42. I lived all my life in that camp. That camp still exists until today. And you are talking now, we are talking now about issues of refugees and their Algeria provided a lot of assistance through the Refugee Aid organization in collaboration with the Algerian Red Crescent and Sahrawi government who also contribute to these camps and as well as the government of Sahrawi. Algeria was the party here who was providing education and medical care, not only to Sahrawi refugees, but also to those from Syria, the refugees from Syria and Palestine. And you also know that the situation in the neighborhood of Algeria and Libya has also contributed to the increase of the burden of caring for refugees in Algeria. Responding to the issue of refugees should start from the roots and the reasons and the causes of this that causing people to become refugee, because this is happening in each and every country or area in Africa. There are reasons and there are causes, and we must share responsibilities for what is happening and for caring for those refugees as well, and dealing with these issues competently, especially to assist those who are managing these camps and settlements. We have to provide serious and critical support, and refrain from putting pressure, political pressure on those NGOs who provide assistance to refugees. Algeria is not the only party suffering, but also the refugees themselves. They cannot get any nationality except the Sahrawi nationality. They cannot get Algerian nationality, but there are only certain number of countries that recognizes Sahrawi nationality. So Algeria is trying to provide Algerian passports to those who need to travel outside Algeria to receive medical care or I want to thank Algeria. I cannot but thank Algeria for that contribution. Thank you. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. South Africa.
Thank you very much. My name is Matalan Tombela, House Chairperson of the National Assembly, International Relations. We would like to put our hands together for the wonderful work done by the other sister countries like Rwanda and others. This is to us another example that the humanitarian philosophy of Ubuntu is indeed alive and well across Africa and the world. In terms of the benefits extended to holders of valid asylum and refugees, the following are some of the benefits that we extend to our people. We have what is known as family reunification. The Western Cape High Court confirmed a set of the Department of Home Affairs standard operating procedures by which a dependent of an asylum seeker can be documented and joined to their family's file. This judgment means wives, husbands, children, and other dependents of asylum seekers and refugees are able to document themselves in South Africa as dependents of the principal asylum application in a process commonly known as family joining. Although an asylum seeker or a refugee is usually required to take care of their social and economic needs, in some instances, the South African government, in partnership with the United Nations High Commissioner, have made available the following social grants: disability grants, foster care grants are available to refugees who are the guardians of foster children, care dependency grants for those taking care of a child with special needs, and social relief of distress grants usually available to refugees who need emergency assistance. As for employment, an asylum seeker or a refugee has the right to seek employment and is protected by national laws against seeker or refugee, against discrimination and so on. Healthcare. The asylum seeker or refugee have access to health services offered by government hospitals and community health clinics. The South African government provides adequate primary education for all children, including those of asylum seekers and refugees. Furthermore, foreign nationals, Madam Chair, married to South Africans are no longer required to return home to renew their visas. Laws requiring foreigners married to South African citizens to leave the country to renew their visas have been declared constitutionally invalid by the Constitutional Court in July 2019, as they separate families. The Constitutional Court also set a deadline of 2 years for the department to change immigration regulations that currently require foreign spouses and children of South African citizens to leave the country to renew their visas, their visitors' visas. Those are some of the things that I wanted to share with the House, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable.
A member of National Assembly in South Africa. The one who was talking was my colleague and my leader in Parliament. I just want also just to add to what he has said as a contribution to the discussion. In Zulu, here in South Africa, we say, awukho umgomo wokulahla umuntu. Loosely translated, that there is no rubbish bin for throwing a human being into. So we can talk about resources, legislation, technology, etc., as part of this solution to the refugee problems that we are faced with throughout the world. And I think that is okay, but we just want to add the aspect. Yesterday, others talked about putting a human face in the whole issue of the refugees. And I think this is also an aspect that is building in that aspect. I think we need to come up with programs that instill our basic values, norms, and principles in our people, whether it's a host country, whether it's a country where refugees are coming from. My colleague has said we need to inculcate the spirit of Ubuntu, humanity. And I think this is what we need to put also when we are also dealing with this issue. Because by so doing, we will be appealing to the people's conscience. Because it's important that we also deal with the person who's actually doing things that are not right. Because by appealing to the conscience of the people, you will be in that way dealing with the person to stop doing bad things to other people. And that is in line with the proverb that always say, do unto others as you will like them to do unto you. And I think we need also to look at reviving programs like moral regeneration, where we will instill moral values to our people in different countries where we're coming from. So in the nutshell, I'm also advocating for going back to the basics as part of the contribution to addressing this refugee crisis we are facing throughout the world. The tendency with human beings is that they always look at sophisticated and complicated solutions, but sometimes in life, very complicated and sophisticated problems are sometimes resolved through simple solutions. And that is my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. Please.
Zambie.
Zambia, please.
My name is Roger Small. I am a member of parliament from Wansawambo in Opera province. At the same time, I sit on IPU, Committee on International Humanitarian Law. Yesterday, I raised an issue to do with the solution for dealing with refugees crisis in Africa. And I talked about dialogue before it happens. I talked about the African Union, the role that it can play. I talked about SADC, and I also talked about the economic community of West African states coming together to avert the problem before it happens. But then we have got a problem already right now. And I'd like Mamadou to comment on this one. The resettlement as a solution. Resettlement is an important solution towards refugees and IDPs. It involves the transfer of refugees from an initial country or location where they are to another country or location that agrees to admit them as refugees. And when I hear different countries talk about what they are doing here in Africa, and the point that most of the countries are bringing out of Ubuntu, the unity, is it possible for UNHCR to identify such countries that are willing to help refugees in other countries where they are suffering and be allocated to those host countries which are safe? It pains me in my heart, and I can't keep quiet to say this, that recently we had xenophobia here in South Africa, where we were talking about Ubuntu, where fellow Africans were killed by fellow Africans. So when you talk about Ubuntu in here, where is Ubuntu? Our actions and what we are saying are too different. And the question is, what are parliamentarians, what is the government of South Africa doing about this? Just moving up yesterday, I was asking, am I safe here? Such a beautiful country that we have, but you cannot move freely. So when we talk about Ubuntu in this house, in this chamber, do we really mean the Ubuntu that we're talking about? That's why I ask upon UNHCR to look at those countries that are able to safely help our refugees where they are, where they can be hosted, give permanent residence, and be counted as human beings. You talked about global compact on refugees. You talked about the meeting that is scheduled in December, next month. I think if that is the solution, to ask each and every government to contribute towards the problem that we have right now, it is important that we look at that and let people come together, raise money, and identify these countries that are able to help the refugees in Africa, because we are one, we are Ubuntu. Is it possible that we can be able to do that with a bold and firm mind to look at ourselves, what we can do and what we cannot do? And the other question that beckons my heart is, when these monies are raised, who monitors the usage of this money? Does it go to the intended target? Is it used properly or it is misused? Who is answerable? Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, Honorable. Egypt.
In the name of Almighty God, Badawi Abdulatif Hilal, member of Egyptian Parliament. I thank all the brothers and sisters, the honorable members who came from all over African countries. I wish them all good health and prosperity, and I wish the present to find proper solutions and implementable solutions for the issue of refugees. We all came here to discuss this issue. We came from our countries to reach solutions. We will share with you the legislations adopted in Egypt regarding this issue. We wish that these legislations would be implemented and that we together may find solutions that we can all implement. Egypt gives due importance to the issue of refugees under the current leadership of African Union, as a leader of the African Union, starting by declaring 2019 as the year for refugees and returnees and displaced people. Egypt had made several suggestions to address the challenges from a comprehensive perspective, covering all aspects, social, economic, and political. We aspire to work with the UNHCR in finding the solutions. The Egyptian government gave priority to making legislations to address this issue. There is this law, anti-human trafficking law, illegal immigration law, and Egypt doesn't deal with refugees as criminals, but as people who have been discriminated against in their countries and who are victims of their situations and the conditions in their areas and countries, which compels them to flee their countries and risk their lives and the livelihood of their families and children. And the law also gives due consideration to the conditions of disabled immigrants and refugees, and the families of children of children who have crossed borders and their families are unknown, and those children who have been who reach Egypt due to human trafficking. Egypt tries to provide them with due with care, medical care, provide basic education, and preserve their dignities. First recommendation is looking at the grassroots of the solution of the conflict and addressing these conflicts and trying to find solutions and peaceful solutions, urging the community and international community to provide the necessary resources to areas that do not have it. Provide recommendations to international fora and conventions and meetings of the UN and African Union to address the challenges that faces the refugees and the environment, the tough environments they meet in the host countries, and trying to support these host countries and host communities, trying to create the social cohesion in the host communities, make legislations concerning refugee welfare in host countries, and also provide the resources, the necessary resources, to in a way that would ensure that the refugees will have medical care, social care, basic education, and work, be able to work in these communities, and support the hosting communities to include these increasing numbers of refugees, provide services to both the refugees and local communities in these areas, in a way that will make them will make them able to contribute to the economic sector in these communities. In this context, we will talk about how far did we go in implementing these such legislations. Can parliamentarians be able to follow through and make the necessary pressure on the governments? What was the role of the Pan-African parliamentarians in pushing through with this agenda in order to find solutions and serious solutions? And how can we put pressure on the political leadership in Africa to work together with parliamentarians and in mobilizing resources and in a way that all African countries can work together as one? I thank you for your time. I wish that you would take these recommendations into consideration and look into the ways of implementing it. I wish you all the best. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Senegal.
Senegal. Senegal, Djibouti, then Morocco. Thank you, Madam President. Without insisting much on the model of Senegal, I would just like to say, when it comes to historical and cultural view, it's a country that allowed itself in hospitality. Hospitality must be joined to its name, the country of Teranga, where the Africans, no matter where they come from, they still felt at home. And Senegalese are particularly proud with this etiquette, a country with hospitality. My parliamentary colleague, the president of the Commission of Law, has already evoked the question of the subject of Mauritanians who were welcomed in Senegal in 1989. Most of them willingly have remained, and some had a few difficulties to go back, but they've always felt at home in Senegal. Thousands of refugees from Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry at the time of Sékou Touré, some of them have become Senegalese at 200%, and they are even eligible to the presidency of Senegal because they are the third generation and have easily acquired the citizenship. And the Senegal can easily talk about its model, where the Minister of Mauritania reminds us constantly that Senegal has no right to any error, because when some Africans are persecuted at home, they have another country that they can go to, which is Senegal, to the point where the Mauritanian brothers were saying that Senegal, despite political difficulties or electoral crisis, that Senegal must carry on representing as a land of welcoming, because Senegal does not only belong to Senegalese, but to all Africans. And I would also want to say that we have the chance to have today a head of state of the generation of post-independence who's totally away from any chauvinist or nationalities, and considers all Africans as brothers, is in the great tradition of Pan-Africanist of our country. And 2 points quickly to end: the question of prevention. Yesterday, our brothers from Cote d'Ivoire spoke about the question of prevention. They are right to say that Africans in general are not very in depth when it comes to the question of prevention. You see, we see things coming out under our eyes, but it's only when it blows up that we start looking for solutions. But while as the crisis begin, we should find solutions. But what do we do today to situations pre-electoral in certain countries in Africa? We know there are trouble in Guinea, in Cote d'Ivoire. Some have started asking the question of nationality. There is also looming to a catastrophic crisis in Cote d'Ivoire. We know it is a very important country for Africa, a country that has done so much for the African continent. We are all attached to this country, and we need to talk about this question without any difficulty, so that conflict may not stem from it. And our leaders and moral authorities, it is now that they need to speak to our brothers in Cote d'Ivoire and to try to see how we can bring our contribution as African. And the last point is the security of refugees. That is the great question when protectors become predators. And that is the case in certain camps of the United Nations or other organizations or foreign countries like France, in Central Africa, where horrible things happened, where children, pedophile, going to children of 10, 11 that are abused and raped by those who came to protect them. Those are central questions that we shouldn't avoid when we talk about refugees. The protectors cannot become predators. It is very important for us. And the last case, it's about Libya. The case of Libya, which is a catastrophe for refugees, African refugees who did not come as refugees, but they were in transit going to Europe, young Eritrean, Ethiopians, West Africans that are ill-treated, sold as slaves, raped. Girls are raped, young girls who are having children with their rapists. Those are dramatic situations. This proves that Africa must take seriously the question of refugees. Africa must take it seriously. Others cannot carry on talking in our name and on our behalf. This African problem for Africans is the question of refugees. And the best way to fight this is to stop this flow of refugees, that Africa must protect Africa. Africa must save Africa and not carry on depending on others for a solution to our problems. So we commend the UNHCR, who are doing an excellent work that we need to support, and hopefully we'll meet again in Geneva in December. Thank you. Djibouti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think everything has been said on the course of this day. I'll go back and salute and commend the excellent presentations of my colleague from Rwanda, who presented the Rwandan system and how Rwanda welcomes refugees. In other words, in this very time of uncertainty, we see borders, but we are seeing hearts which are being closed, societies which are becoming very hostile to foreigners. We are witnessing the cases of xenophobia. I think we need to hire the refugees as our very like-minded people. If I may say this, we need to see them. We need to ascribe unto them a human face to these vague waves of immigrants. We need to see them like brothers and sisters, mothers, who should have stayed back home into their own countries. But in spite of conflict, insecurity, poverty, even the climate changes that force them to leave their home countries, but are to be welcomed. What may I say again? To be welcomed warmly, and to use this very case, specific case of Rwanda, which I have to commend and salute this legendary hospitality that you have offered to the returnees recently. In other words, I think we need all of us, as my colleague from Senegal said, revisit the question of the issue of refugees as a very concerning issue which touches the very heart of all Africans. This preoccupies all of us. This is a question that we have to take seriously into consideration. The immigrant or the refugees, if I may recapitulate, if I may summarize, we need to take advantages, benefits of the immigration which is well planified, well managed, and a well-secured immigration. I thank you, Madam Chair. Morocco.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The Moroccan Kingdom is proud through all that has been presented by the Rwandan government to accommodate the refugees in Rwanda. Reacting to the previous interventions, we request the implementation of the social security, in order to have the ability of those who want to return back. We believe that there is a social need for the people to be repatriated back to their own home countries and home countries. So in order for the host countries to be able to do that repatriation, they will need support. Also, the Security Council has a number of articles that should be implemented internationally. In the Moroccan Kingdom, after the king has given the green line for the refugees to be integrated and the migration policy through 2013. We believe that the Morocco has learned a number of experiences in order to settle a number of the refugees coming from the Sahrawi, the south of the Sahrawi Republic, and we will able to settle 50,000 of those refugees, and they enjoy health, education, and a decent life shelter and a place of work. And this is all through the constant prayers of His Majesty the King Mohammed V, which has stated and reiterated over and over since 2013 until we are writing those pages in front of you today. We all know that the officials, that the strategy in Morocco when it comes to migration which is named as the humanitarian strategy for migration, which offers social protection for the refugees in Morocco, which is why that we need to be used as an example for the African countries. And also we support all the other countries that are able to offer their borders similar to what's happening in Morocco. And similar vein, the Moroccan with the European Union has also congratulated and condemned, and also from the High Commission of the United Nations and also the Security Council have looked positively through our ability to deal with the migration policy. And also our king has been a number of the people that were able to deal with the migration issue through a humanitarian lens, and also to look at the migration, which is also a phenomenon that affects all humans on many parts of the world. We also state that we have a number of we have to also look at this policy in Morocco because it is a positive one. And also the president of Guinea, and also in the African Union heads of state that has mentioned that we are proud that the Moroccan government and its leader, the Excellency, the King, in terms of facilitating the issues pertaining to the migration. And also the current chairperson and the president of the African Union that has received a number of appraisals from many other member states of the AU. So that's why the Morocco was stated as a country to host the conference on migration in Morocco.
Merci, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable. Now I'm going to ask an expert to intervene. First, South Africa, and then the expert.
Honorable members, the paragraph of the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa states that we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. On the basis of the above-mentioned commitments, Chair, as contained in our Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, we disagree and dispute any notion which seeks to opportunistically and maliciously portray our country as xenophobic. South Africa is not xenophobic. We have never been xenophobic, Afrophobic, and we don't have policies or legislations which promote attacks on anybody on the basis of nationality or country of origin. Of course, like all our sister countries, we have our own internal challenges, such as crime and high levels of unemployment, which galvanizes and militarizes those in the periphery and doldrums of poverty. The unfortunate events of criminality against foreign nationals and South Africans in our country, disguised as xenophobic attacks, have plunged South Africa in a precarious position that seek to reverse its political gains and end through the struggle against colonialism and apartheid. We are aware, Honorable Chair, and we will never forget that many African countries and people stood with us in our struggle against apartheid. We worked together to destroy apartheid and overcome the divisions it created. We value our relations with other African countries and the need to work together to strengthen political, social, and trade ties. Where communities have genuine grievances, this will be addressed accordingly. So our criminal justice system is ready to deal with perpetrators of violence, looting, and lawlessness. We must act responsibly, therefore, and stop disseminating wrong information. Honorable Chair, there is no justification for the looting and destruction of businesses owned by South Africans elsewhere in the continent. Therefore, when we condemn the acts of violence and killings of our people, we must never use double standard by elevating the lives of certain citizens in other instances. Therefore, we appeal that South Africa should not be viewed as xenophobic. We are dealing with this situation, and the support is necessary under the circumstances. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you to you. Now I'm going to hand over to the expert, Madame Ousmane. Well, thank you for the word. I've followed very well the interventions of the lady from Rwanda, what is happening in Rwanda when they welcome refugees and migrants. I believe that it is something to commend, but there are preoccupations. These people, as they displaced, there are reasons that push them to be displaced. We must also try to see when they get there, are they really integrated into the community or not? Because the concern is when it comes to education, these migrants, those children that attend school, are they going to public schools of Rwanda, or they have their own schools that belongs to them? Do we know places where people who are displaced, when they arrive, they prefer to create their own schools where they are maybe going to teach in their own languages? And the second thing, we must also think of that we must seek for the origin of displacements of populations. I commend Senegal. They say back in Senegal there are those who have already obtained citizenships, but with time, doesn't that create a certain problem? Because we know people who have already lived in certain places more than 2 centuries, but who currently have a citizenship issue. Is that not going to be a problem? Thank you. Morocco.
Well, Chairperson, I point of order, because a member that has entered into the meeting, I would like to ask, why is this individual been present here, and who has given him the right to be here among us, and through what right?
Merci.
Thank you for the intervention. I'm going to hand over the floor to another expert, Madam Mayuma. Madam Ayula.
Ayola Male. I'm from Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the Ghana section. What I want to say has to do, I want to first of all commend the UNCHR for a good job, but I still believe there's a room for improvement, particularly when we look at women. Women in the refugee camps, we know what they're passing through. These are women that has passed through trauma, through conflict and war, and some are refugees, they are migrants, they've come to find a relief, sort of, but they are worse for it. They have no health care. They are being raped and violated daily. What is this institution doing? It's a UN institution. It's supposed to protect women, children, and all gender generally, but women particularly. As you know, women they are not equally treated when it comes to conflict. They have more problems. They have more issues to deal with. And these are women that they are caregivers. They take care of children and they are traumatized. And to add to that again, they don't have basic facilities. What are you doing, please, to take care of this urgent situation? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci pour votre intervention.
Thank you for your intervention. I think we are going to suspend the session. We still have time to answer to most of the questions, and well, thank you very much.
Time, very good interventions that have shown maybe few specific elements that we need probably to highlight a bit more. One of them is the issue of forced displacement prevention root causes. I think really most of the questions that were linked with that or comments really go back to you as government representatives, but also to all of us, to making sure that root causes prevention are really dealt with, so that we have less and less refugee situations and that we have less and less protracted refugee situations. That's our own aims, and that's really the third and fourth objective of the Global Compact on Refugees. I think there was also a very good point raised by several interventions about how can we make sure that through our interventions in support of refugees, we are able to not only not frustrate host populations, but in fact supporting them, so that we are not only looking at the refugees. This was, I think, also a very general comment made by almost everyone. I think there was also a good level of understanding that putting human face to the issue of refugees is critical. That was said yesterday, and I hope all of us will be making sure that as we leave this area, all the philosophies, all the past experiences about refugees being our sisters and brothers really need to remain central. Only that way will we be able to support them and to respond to the needs. And to the last person who spoke, I think while we try, all of us, to do all our utmost to protect refugees, among them some of the most vulnerable being children, elderly, women, and all of that, I think there is still a long way to go. But this is really a common challenge to absolutely all of us. There were few examples provided, the chief, one of them being Rwanda, but also many others from Senegal from the 80s, and from Algeria to Zambia, and we have had many examples, Morocco, few others, where we have really had very good examples of situations like what prevent a situation from refugees from being included, language barriers. We really heard all these good and practical examples that hopefully will help us move forward, and these are critical and extremely important ones. When it comes to solutions, voluntary repatriation remain cornerstone, so the voluntariness and creating conditions so that refugees can return. There was a question about resettlement. What is resettlement? And I wanted here, because we do not always have such opportunities, to share that in the late 1990s and early 2000s, two countries in West Africa, Benin and Burkina Faso, started to experience resettlement. And they did it because they wanted to receive refugees who were hosted in certain countries in large numbers, mostly refugees in Tanzania, in Rwanda, also in certain part of West Africa. They started receiving them to their own countries. The experiences of Benin and Burkina Faso lasted for a few years before it got closed, and the reason for that was that the program was not necessarily adapted to the realities. I just wanted to share that example and say that if there are countries who are interested into starting a new resettlement program to receive refugees from the continent, I think they are probably more than welcome. Now, there were 3 sets of questions. I would like to see if the Honorable Member of Parliament of Rwanda could respond to some of them. There were 2 mostly relating to Rwanda and the Rwandan example. If you can, if you have any reaction to that, that would be extremely helpful. And then we will ask our colleagues in Nairobi to speak mostly to 2 issues. One, when money is raised, how does it how do we do any type of monitoring, if any, because as I said yesterday, all resources raised through development actors go through government. So what is the role of Parliament? And I'm sure many of you might know how to go around that. And secondly, what is the role of national governments into all this when we are really changing gears, making sure that national government are not being sidelined, but that they are really central to their own development for the host populations. What is the role of national government? So I think after that one we will be probably ready to complete. So Honorable Member of Parliament from Rwanda.
Please. Yes, Honorable. Thank you, Madam President.
شكرا. نريد توضيح.
Point of clarification. Point of clarification. Point of clarification. Chairperson, I would like an answer in terms of the point of order that was stated by my colleague. I haven't received an answer yet.
Can you be more precise? What you want an answer from the colleague from the UNHCR, or?
Answer from the organizers. I need an answer from the organizers, the committee, in terms of the point of order that I have raised, which was raised by my colleague here. Thank you.
Chair, can I take the floor on this matter? I'm Vice President, Pan-African Parliament, and at the moment in this room, I think I have the local standing to speak on behalf of PAP. I am fully aware of the sensitivities of this issue, and I would ask even the IPU to leave it to PAP. We are hosting this conference, and we don't want to regret having hosted this conference. So I know IPU is in a difficult situation, but I think the point of order is understood. For information, the IPU organized and we are hosting. But then the IPU asked Pan-African Parliament also to nominate some of the delegates. And the PAP asked regional caucus chairpersons to nominate names. So when the caucus chairpersons from the northern region did, they nominated, and each region did. So whoever is sitting here was nominated by the region. They come from by the chairperson. And if there is a question as to their legitimacy in participating in this meeting, I think the matter should then be raised with us, the leadership of PAP, not the individuals. Because whoever is here was invited by Pan-African Parliament, if they are parliamentarians. And I request that I am available during lunchtime, we can engage on this issue. But we don't want to divert the attention from the business of the conference to other conflicts between countries or persons. So may I request that we have time, if you like, when we break for lunch, we can chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Is Morocco satisfied with this answer? We can carry on, Honorable from Rwanda.
I thank you for granting me the floor for me to respond to some questions pertaining to Rwanda. I think the majority of the people who intervened was all about acknowledgement and thanking us, and I thank you as well. There are some challenges which have been evoked by some of our honorable colleagues. My colleague from Senegal evoked the difficulties with the participants pertaining to the frustration in between the local authorities and those NGOs we went above. According to the law concerning the refugees, pertaining to Refugees Act, we set up a committee, a steering committee subdivided with the UNHCR and the Human Rights Commission, and that this very commission is tasked to assess and deal with everything pertaining to refugees' lives. My colleague from Algeria said it is the very time to set up actions and solutions. These are the things that we are undertaking with our countries and having African solutions. What I needed to say, to underscore, it is the issue with our youth, young youth who are dying in the Mediterranean water. These are our children, our nieces, our parents. We need to find durable or sustainable solutions so that they may remain in our respective countries instead of drowning them in the waters. The Africa we want, all of us, is that our youth can benefit, enjoy human safety or securities and physical and financial securities. As being parliamentarians, members of parliament, we are opinion leaders. It is in our own responsibilities to come about with solutions for our youth. We need to work shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, so that our youth, our African youth who are today in Libya, can come back to our countries. We need to sensitize our countries to help them to come up with solutions. Our youth who are prisoners or slaves in refugees camps of Libya. Rwanda is not a rich country with mineral endowment, but we may say that it is a country with a heart. We, under the auspices of our President, His Excellency President Paul Kagame, decided to help these youth. This is why, as Rwandans, as our colleague from Senegal said it earlier on, we are a very hospitable country. We are an African country, welcoming everyone who wants to live, who wishes to live peacefully with other people. we have got a very long experience because our leaders are, most of them have been refugees. This is the reason why we learned from that, so that we may offer shelter to everyone who wishes to live peacefully. We need to take this into consideration and come about with solution for our youth, especially those youth who are in Libya, in refugees camps. With regard to the questions, the question posed concerning the children attending school yesterday, I said earlier on, I elucidated that we have non-discriminatory laws with regard to the inclusion of the refugees in the educational system. At the level of primary school, we signed an MOU in 2019, according to which all children from primary school 50% have to be mainstreamed or integrated in primary school and subsequently receiving an education based on the national curriculum. Before, at the level of camps, there was a special education organized or under the auspices of the UNHCR. Currently, we're trying to integrate the refugees children in our educational system in Rwanda. At the secondary level, 100% of refugees children are integrated or mainstreamed into our education system alongside the Rwandan children. With regards to the issues of citizenship or nationality, with regard to the situation of statelessness, what we have come up about to finish with the issue of statelessness, Rwanda undertook a series of policies and rights and laws relating to the issues of nationality. Rwanda has undertaken a lot of actions, which are the following. There is a adhesion of the Convention of 1954 in relation to the status of stateless people, and also on the reduction of statelessness. That was first. Second, there is a law pertaining to the modification of citizenship to align to the constitutional rights on the equality in between men and women, so as to change or conserve, to preserve their own citizenship and to bestow this citizenship to their children. The reduction of the risk of statelessness in reinforcing the risk of status, so that every child may be registered, enrolled immediately or promptly after their birth. I may say confidently that every child who's born at the health center has to be registered at the civil registry at the very same center. Following on these procedures, the late processes of enrollment of the children born in Rwanda. Recently, in October 2009, at the UNHCR Assembly, the government of Rwanda undertook engagement to eradicate the issue of statelessness by 2024. This is what I can say with regard to the issue of citizenship or nationality. I thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the protection of women, we have what is called one-stop center. these are specialized or specific services to assist or to aid people who have gone through violences. The majority are women and young children, men as well. But the women and children are being taken into consideration so as to benefit a special protection with a medical expertise personnel, psychiatrists and psychologists to cater to their needs, to protect people women who have been raped, and there is a special shelter for these women who have gone through violence, sexual violence. I thank you.
We have few minutes for our colleagues in Nairobi to speak a bit about national government ownership as well as monitoring, if any, of development funds. Over to you, Jonathan and Daniela, quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamadou. And we'd like to thank the opportunity to share our views. I think the approach of integrating socioeconomic services, government systems, actually gives us the advantage of having a government oversight at different levels. At the parliamentarian level, parliaments could play an important oversight role, especially when it comes to financing provided by development banks. And they have done that. They have been asking the right questions, especially in the region, in the Eastern Horn of Africa region. Parliaments have been scrutinizing this process and providing oversight, and we have seen interesting experience there. In addition to the legislative branch, the executive branch would also have an important oversight and guidance role. And in this case, I think government entities responsible for development planning, for development and aid coordination, have been playing an important role in coordinating activities. And in some countries, government-led coordination mechanisms are being used to provide an oversight and guidance to development and humanitarian interventions that are going to benefit refugees. And this goes all the way down to local governments, which are also playing an important role. But in addition to government oversight, we also believe that community oversight and community monitoring is also important. And we have seen in some development projects, communities have the ability not only to identify and prioritize their needs, but also to set up community monitoring mechanisms and monitor the implementation of projects. So it is important to highlight that the integrated approach actually make it easier and much better for government, either legislative or executive branch, but also local governments and communities to play active oversight and monitoring role. So that is an important thing that we've observed. And as we continue working on this, I think the efforts should be made to strengthen the capacity of national, local, as well as communities, national governments, local governments, as well as communities. So these are my few thoughts. Enrique?
Yes. So maybe I can give you an example how we work with the Turkana County government. So Turkana County is the county where the Kakuma refugee camps are there. And you're right, like the old way of working were giving money from the donors to the NGOs, and they deliver services and products to the refugees, and most only exclusively to the refugees. But now we're working with the Turkana County government. The Turkana County government included the refugees in their county level planning. They work with UNHCR and other donor partners on integrating refugees socially and economically. So now the Turkana County gets money for the development of the area where the refugees are hosted, and only also whole of their county. and thereby including the refugees. In this way, you can assure that you as government, local or nationally, or as a member of parliament, you have the oversight. You know what amount of money is coming into the area of your influence and for what is it used for, and you have the rights to go yourself and see yourself. So that might be a good way of thinking. It's in the new way of working, but it also ensures that you have more oversight and control over the funds you flowing into these areas, in your areas of influence.
Thank you very much. And over to you, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que nous pouvons lever la séance. Avant de nous disperser, je vais...
Thank you very much. I think we can end this session, and before we do that, we're going to ask for all the parliamentaries to please come and take a picture. And
Goodbye shoe marks from last